Hello, I'm Alan Gibson and I teach Wing Chun, and what we're going to do here is we're going to look through a basic introduction to the Wing Chun system, if you like, go through the first stage of the syllabus, and we're going to see what kind of drills we do and why we do them, and what kind of attributes they will give you in terms of fighting ability. Wing Chun is a very simple and direct system, Chinese Kung Fu, traditional Chinese Kung Fu. And we try and, it's not a competitive style, we don't compete with it because we're training for real fighting. So we're looking to get the job done as quickly as we can. And you have to be aware of this idea all the way through what you do. So throughout all of the drills and everything, you have to be thinking about keeping it simple, not making it more complex than it is, and keeping everything down to a bare minimum in order to find the line to attack the person. Wong Shun Lung decided that attack was the best form of defence. If you're too defensive in an attacking situation, if someone's attacking you and you're being too defensive, you won't be able to keep on defending because the guy's just going to attack you and sooner or later he's going to get you. Once the talking's over, and assuming you're a decent citizen, you should be trying to talk you out of a fight first, or not get involved in the first place by using your awareness and your environment. Once the talking's over, you want to get the job over as quickly as possible and get the hell out of there. So you have to be switched on enough to attack and be direct. And under the pressure and stress of fighting, when you've got adrenaline in your body, you want to be as simple and direct as possible, because anything vaguely flamboyant just isn't going to work if someone's actually attacking you. So we're just aiming to attack back. Wing Chun has been around for hundreds of years, really. It's only recently come to light since probably the 70s, 60s, 70s. It became popular, popularised largely by the fact that Bruce Lee originally did Wing Chun before he went into the movies. And the stuff that he does in the movies isn't Wing Chun, really. And also Wong Shun Lung in the 60s and 50s was a peerless fighter, did a lot of challenge fights and beat a lot of people, was largely undefeated. And these are the things that have made Wing Chun popular, if you like, popularised it. Yip Man came to Hong Kong and taught the system more openly, whereas before that it was a private system, a family system. I've been teaching Wing Chun for about 15, 20 years. I've gone through several stages in my own personal development, and what I'm trying to do here is put down where I am now and to express the way that I do my Wing Chun. So the drills that are here are ones that we would use in the class, and we're trying to show them from a beginner's standpoint, building up, showing how each drill adds to the next drill, how they all fit together in the end. Obviously, you also need to practice your forms. We haven't gone through the forms in this because we've got them on another DVD. The forms are an essential, integral part of what we do, and that needs to be included in your training. Okay, in the first stages of Wing Chun, you'll be learning your Silim Tao form, and you'll be learning how to stand, your basic stances, basic stepping positions, and basic hitting. So you're learning how to strike, how to hit something with power and being relaxed, and how to stand and move around, really. That's the basic elements. You'd obviously also work out your centre line and start to understand sensitivity. We're just going to have a quick look at the basic Wing Chun stance, the training stance, which is used in Silim Tao. It's Yi Ji Kim Yang Ma. If Mark goes into the stance now. Yi Ji Kim Yang Ma incidentally translates as character 2 goat gripping stance. You can see when the stance is correctly formed here, the toes point in to form effectively an equilateral triangle, and the knees aren't pulled in hard, but the whole leg is rotated in. The hips are rotated up and forwards. This creates a line from the shoulder through the hip to the knee. So this is a straight line. If Mark pushes his hips forward too much, the stance bends and he's obviously unstable this way. If he bends too much this way, he's unstable forwards. So if he gets back into his stance there, what this creates is a strong grounding between the legs and the hands. If we now take this hand here, because the elbow points to the floor and is lower than the wrist, if I press in against him here, we can test the stance. I can lean on this quite hard. He can push his elbow forward still. The shoulder's not moving. It's just this part of the arm is moving, where the pivot point is here. And now I can lean on him quite strongly, and the force is going back into the ground via this foot, because this angle matches this angle here. This gives him power without commitment. So if I let go of that, the arm can spring forward and the stance absorbs the power. So he's not out of balance at any point. If he now pivots slowly that direction, you can see this leg is doing the same thing. So while he's in Sun Tao, he's training both of his rear legs. So when he turns, this leg is here. This leg is now doing the same job, and again, the stance is stable in this direction. You point the hips this way, Mark, and the shoulders. Again, if I can press on this, he's very strong. All that force is going to the rear leg. And what that means is that when he hits, any impact or recoil from the punch goes straight back down the arm and back into the rear leg, into the floor. It's grounded out effectively. This arm will do the same thing. Still strong, back into the ground, and there's no commitment in this stance. Okay, now we're going to learn to step from the basic stance, the Yi Ji Kim Young Ma, into the Sung Ma, which is a forward step or forward defensive step, because as you step in, the front leg, thigh, knee, comes over to cover the groin and the rear leg to protect you as you come forwards. And you see Mark stepping in now. You can see he's come straight into a line this way. Everything's lined up. His hips are facing this way. His shoulders are facing this way. Everything's 100% facing. The angle of this arm now matches this rear leg here. So again, the same points I showed earlier, illustrated here very easily. Power, any recoil from this goes straight back into the leg. This front leg is now covering his rear leg and his groin by turning the foot in. This is also acting as a brake, so that if I pull on this, he can withstand the pull quite easily. If the pull becomes too much, he can just shuffle up to close down the gap. If I push him this way, his rear leg is acting as a brake. And if the push becomes too much, he can slide back in Sung Ma. Now we're going to look at Sam Gok Bo, which is stepping forward and using the hands, so stepping and attacking with the hands. So we're going to be striking a focus mitt, which gives a little bit of something to aim at and something to give a little bit of weight and impact to the punch, so you can hit hard if you want to. We're going to keep nice and relaxed at the moment just to create the correct form. Mark here is going to be holding the focus mitt at about shoulder height and keeping his hands nice and vertical. And Sean is going to be using the Wing Chun punch. He's going to be hitting with the bottom 3 knuckles here. You see the wrist slightly raises and turns as the hand goes in. This gives a straight line through the bone here, back down to match the floor, like we said before. Also, what it prevents, if he locks his fist out, if that pad moves back a bit here and Sean punches, you'll find that at the end of the punch, his elbow pops up and the handle drops slightly. This raising of the knuckles and the bending of the wrist, flexing of the wrist, just enables the knuckles to keep rising. As long as the knuckles are rising all the time, the reaction force will always go back into the ground. Obviously, you shouldn't be hitting at full extension. You should be striking here with the elbow bent. So that means that in reality, when he hits someone, he's got the power to follow through and drive them off their stance. We want to destabilise people when we hit them. Okay, if we go on with Sang Gok Bo now. And Mark will move back. And then we can turn around and come back again. And you'll notice that if we look at Sean stepping, if we can just have Sean here on his own, if he turns around and faces this way, when he moves forward this way, he steps and the rear leg drags up. He's trying to keep the heel in contact with the ground as much as possible, because that is his base for his power. If he raises, we can test again here. If he brings himself up onto his toes here and pushes me now, he's not very powerful. He's likely to lose force in his ankle. If he keeps his heel on the ground and presses me, I can't resist the force here. It's too strong, because there's a direct route for power straight down into the ground there. You don't lose anything in the ankle. Right, now we're going to take the Yi Ji Kim Young Ma stance and we're going to turn it, Jun Ma. So if Sean now pivots his stance, you can see the action is, if you like, his axis is through his spine. So if he pivots again, and again, you see that the body stays in a nice stable position, doesn't come up and down or bob or anything like that, or weave, and the turn is driven from the knees and the hips rather than the shoulders. The whole body rotates in a smooth action. If you can go through 180 degrees now, Sean. Change your hands as you go, if you need to. We use pivoting to change angle under pressure. Now, if, for instance, Sean was facing me here, if I press into him here, he can pivot to lose the force, and he can turn himself off and then realign at a new angle here. If I press him here, he can pivot the opposite way here, and you can see he's letting my force go and turning, covering and hitting at the same time. We can also use the turn to generate power for punching. So if we get Mark with his focus mitts in again, we can just do straight turning punches on the focus mitts. This teaches just how to turn and also how to develop power for the punch and to change angle from one position to another position. We can then take these ideas and develop them and move forward, so we're learning to step and hit at a moving target and both going forwards and going backwards. As we can see here, Chun's going to go forwards first, hitting the pads. And then he can retreat under pressure. Of course, you can vary these drills however you want. You can feed the pads in any way you like. It's actually quite a skill to actually be able to use the pads and supply the person with a decent force, but that's another story. Now we're going to look at the Dan-Gurk, which is the ascending heel kick from the basic Samgok Ma stance, the forward stance. With the kick, the heel wants to travel as much as possible in a straight line to the target, because if you pick the foot up and then go forwards, you can get knocked off balance. So when Mark kicks off his lead leg here, the heel goes pretty much as straight as it can, pronouncing the heel into the target. At the same point, this leg is now deriving the power because the heel's coming up this way. The recoil goes back into the stance. If you go back to your starting position, if Mark picks the foot up and stamps it in and Chun steps in, he'll bounce off. Because Chun's also in a Wing Chun stance, which is driving power up from the ground. It's a bit like a snowplow. If Mark kicks upward more when the punch comes in, you can see the recoil goes back into the ground and sends him back. He can now practice the heel kick going forward. You can see that as he kicks, he pushes off the rear leg to derive the power into the kick. You can equally practice this kick against a wall bag or against a dummy or any solid object, as long as you're not going to damage it. Okay, now we're going to look at Tu Ma, which is the retreating step of Wing Chun. It's used when you're pushed back under pressure. Tu Ma literally means pushed step. It's sometimes described as side stepping. You need to retreat in Wing Chun. If someone's bigger and heavier or stronger than you or pressing into you, just let the stance, your basic Yiji Kim Yung Ma stance will collapse back into this pushed step, Tu Ma. Your aim is to move backwards and absorb the range, so the person who's attacking is actually getting closer to you or coming more into range. So you're not going straight backwards. Obviously, if Mark travels straight backwards when someone's attacking him, it would be very easy for him to follow in. So he moves back and sideways slightly at an angle and realigns himself, trying to keep the shoulders square as he goes back all the time, and using the legs to cover the groin and the rear leg. Effectively, he's going back defensively, but he's putting himself in a position where he can attack from, as you'll see. If Mark goes back now, you see basically one leg goes straight back and the other one comes over to cover the gap. So if he's facing me here, this forward leg is now covering his rear leg and his groin, protecting him. His stance, hips and shoulders are facing towards the attacker. If he goes back again, this leg goes straight back. The stance turns, so he's facing this way now. So effectively he's in a forward stance. Although he's moved backwards, he's ended up in a stance which allows him to re-attack. This will become more obvious or apparent when we put it into the drills later on, and you can see how it actually works in action. But that's Tu Ma, which is a slide step. Now we'll look at Dan Chi Sao, single stick in hands now, which is one of the primary drills of Wing Chun from when you start, and you'll keep doing it always because it trains very important things. If Mark and Chun now get into position, you see Chun's using a Tan Sao here, and Mark's in Fuk Sao. The first move, Chun sends a palm strike into the sort of chin, throat area, a straight palm strike which goes into threaten. Mark then uses Jam Sao, letting his elbow come in, sinking elbow, coming across and covering the centre there. And now from this position, Mark is ready to punch towards Chun, which enables Chun to perform Bong Sao, or the Bong Sao is forced, if you like. The arm is bent into Bong Sao. So the hand's been taken off the target, so now the elbow is pointing at the centre to cover the target. And now we come back to the beginning. It's a cyclical drill, just goes round and round, but it's very important to work it with feeling and to make sure that both people are training the right attributes from the drill. So Chun again palms in. Mark uses his Jam Sao. Mark punches back. You see there's not much movement here. As soon as the punch is coming from the elbow here, the bong sao is forced on. You see this line now is pointing straight in at centre, back to the tan sao and foot sao position. Now, there are several things that can happen here. If we just get the drill started, get moving, you can see both people in the stances. The stances are nice and strong, they're not wobbling all over the place. The shoulders aren't being used, it's just the elbow that fires the shot off, and the hands are nice and relaxed. The elbows are used to control. If you look at this area here, you'll see the elbows are doing all the work here. If the hands are relaxed, the hands can only be relaxed if the elbows are taking work. Now, several things can go wrong with this drill. If Chun is too stiff with his initial palm strike and leaves his arm extended when he makes it, now this line is now very difficult for him to perform bong sao, because when Mark's arm comes forward, he'll have to come backwards with the bong sao, or he'll just get hit. So that's one thing. You've got to be relaxed and let the arm just recoil naturally after the palm. So when the palm is made here, the arm is now relaxed and available. Bong sao is able to happen because the elbow is free. The other thing that can happen is when, after the palm strike here, when this punch comes, when Mark punches, he has to keep his elbow down and drive the punch in the Wing Chun punching style with the elbow down, using the stance to get the power. If his elbow straightens out and his arm comes high, Chun doesn't need to use bong sao. He can just use his squareness of his stance and just using the concept of tan sao, just go forwards and cover this shot. Very important to do that. So let's have a look at this from the other side, other hands or other way round, so that we can see what's happening now. The other two hands are just isolated here. You can see the entire drill is done with feeling. One attack instigates another defence, and that's always the way it is. It's not just boom, boom, boom. They're not just doing it like robots. They're feeling everything they do. And you can test an incredible amount of stuff from your Wing Chun from single stick and hands. We can now take the single stick and hands and add footwork to it and use the footwork steps that we've used already. The forward step and the retreating two-ma step can all be introduced in this drill. So for instance, if Chun steps forward now, using the forward step, you can see Mark has stepped back using the two-ma push step. He's literally been pushed along. The elbow pressure here has pushed this elbow, pushed his hip, and driven him backwards. Chun steps straight in. Mark's angled off slightly using the two-ma. Now he has a dominant position to his stance. Although he's retreated, he's now in a position to come back forward. So as he steps in, so a re-attack. And now Chun moves off to the side, stepping backwards using his bong sao, or sideways technically, using his bong sao to cover this attack and repositioning himself. And we can now take it and start again from the beginning. So Chun steps forward, Mark steps side step, comes in, steps out. And you can see all the things that we've talked about so far and all the basic movements are being used now. If we look at that from the other side, using the other arm, so now Chun steps in this way. You can see Mark moving backwards. When he steps in this way, Chun steps sideways and uses his bong sao. Does have another option if we start again here. So when Chun steps in this way, if this position is allowed here, if he's got enough strength in this, it's better, rather than going to bong sao, which is defensive, he can turn to tan sao using a small shuffle step this way and use tan sao and punch. You see, it's a smaller movement and he's got a stronger position, because tan sao and punch is obviously an attacking position, whereas bong sao is defensive. He then has to do another move to originate an attack. So if we can see that one again. And again, same thing applies. All of this is driven. One person attacks, the other person feels what's happening and responds with an appropriate defence. It's all driven by feeling. If we can do a few more, just to see that in action. You can see using the smallest movement possible to achieve the necessary angle. And then we're going to look at some pak sao drills, just basic drills to understand the concept. One person's punching. In this particular example, Chun will be sending punches out. He's sending full extension punches. And Mark is using his pak sao. The pak sao hand comes to the centre every time, always comes to the centre line here, central axis. So just learning to punch and to deflect. If Chun's punches are too stiff and the pak saos are coming in, he'll get bounced. His body will be turned or his stance will be disrupted because the pak sao is coming up in the same way as a punch would. And the same with Mark. If his pak saos are too stiff and Chun's punches are too strong, his stance will start wobbling around and he'll be disrupted. So you're learning both sides here. One person's learning to punch nicely, full extension, and the other person's learning to use the pak sao to defend. Then we can start introducing a step in with a pak sao to attack, a pak sao and punch to attack. So if we go again here, see that Mark is now stepping in, using the Pak Sao and punching. His step is coming across the stance, dominating this corner here and attacking through this angle. We do that again. If we see that from the other side entry. So you're moving in, controlling the elbow, trapping down, turning the body a bit and coming in and punching. Okay, we're now going to look at some variations on the basic Pak Sao idea. Here again, Sean's going to be punching. That's it. If we slow that right down, Sean punches here. Every now and then the Pak Sao will slide across the arm here. And now when the next punch comes, the next line is fed, this hand is coming through to the shoulder and allowing Mark to enter and coming in and attack with this hand here. So in other words, when the hand crosses the centre line here, the next hand comes in as predictable. And if another punch comes through here, that's easily covered. He's already in position to cover the next line. And there are several other variations we can derive from this, like Lan Sao, for instance, or other ways of using it, just different ways of applying it. You can apply Lap Sao to it, or any other technique you like, really. And we're going to look at some other variations on the Pak Sao drill, starting off on using the forward leg and attacking, entering, and then carry on, learning to flow, learning not to stop when your attack gets stopped. So here Sean's going to be entering with Pak Sao and punch. Mark's using a Pak Sao to stop him, and he's just learning to flow past. Here using the underlap. Or we could use Pak Sao twice, depending on what the line of the force is. It all depends on what feeling he gets from Mark. It's all done by sensitivity. See, he's trying to stay square on, he's shuffling forward in his forward stance, moving things out of the way. As things get in the way, he removes them or flows past them. Ultimately, just looking forward to getting in and hitting. If we slow that right down, you can see what's happening. Pak Sao and enter, then that second path, this hand's now available to Lap Sao here and enabling the next path. Or to Pak Sao. So just picking out the next obstruction and removing it. Okay, I always like to use a little bit of basic fence work as well because it makes it more applicable to the reality of the street. So what we're going to use here is just an open fence, open-handed fence, pleading fence, some people call it. Being faced with an aggressor, and at the early levels, we're just going to look at lines and angles and pressures. So here we're going to deal with either a straight punch, it could be a push, or it could be a punch, it can be any, it doesn't really matter what kind of punch, it's a force that travels towards you in a straight line, or a hook punch, just looking again, seeing something coming from a curve. Initially, Sean's going to be supplying a straight punch. You see Mark is now going into his Chun retreating step. He's taken, using the concept of Fuk Sao, two hands coming forward, he's covered the attack, been pushed back at this angle, and it's ready to attack now. And so this can be a push or it can be a straight punch, it doesn't really matter, just learning to deal with forces and lines. If you do that on the other foot, going the other way so we can see it. You can see here, Mark's stance, arms and everything is all lined up, ready to attack. Sean's been driven off to the side, wedged out as it were. This also makes, if Sean throws another punch in, it makes it very easy to defend against that because he's positioned himself in a way that allows him to accept the next line. If we now look at a hook punch, Sean throws a hook punch in. Again, it's not necessarily a boxer's hook, it's just a curved punch. And now using the same handwork and footwork, only moving forwards instead of backwards, Mark's coming in, walking in towards this shoulder really, which is kind of or the midway here, halfway between the hand and the centre. Hips and shoulders facing, covering with Fuk Sao's concept here, and this again, this hand now is just going straight in and hitting, so he's going immediately into hit because the target, the centre is open and ready to hit. If we can see that again a couple of times. And if we see that off the other hand. And now if Mark supplies some straight punches for Sean, so you can see some different variations. So he's been driven back into his retreating step. He's putting his hands in a position where he's ready to go. So if Mark now throws a second punch after the straight punch, he's able to just go straight in and attack. If we go the other hand, straight hand, you can see at the end of the day the position here is much stronger here. He's flanked him, he's come to his corner. This next hand, even if it comes straight down the middle here, it's easily covered because the hand's already positioned in a way that enables that. If Mark throws a couple of hook punches now, see moving into the corner, when the hook punch comes, moving into the target. If you get a second hook punch come, you just hit straight away. Now we're going to move on to taking those basic stances and steps and starting to move them together, starting to see how footwork relates to handwork, starting to understand a bit more about sensitivity. By this stage you should be able to perform your swim towel form completely and integrate the various drills and things from that so you know where they're coming from in the form. We're now going to practice the Chun retreat step in combination with various hand techniques, and first of all what we're going to do is just straight attacks, just to keep the idea simple, but we're going to use different hand attacks like Tan San punch, Jut San punch, Bong Sao, and which technique comes out will depend on really on the force that comes in and where the hands are initially. So if your hands are down, you'd be using Bong Sao because that elbow is the quickest route to the target. If your hands are up, you'd be using a different technique, but we can see that as we go along. If we now have got Chun stepping in and attacking Mark. Mark there, you can see a Jut Sao. Tan San punch. He's going back into a side step, retreating as the force comes in and allowing himself to get into the corner to access the line to attack from. There's a Bong Sao. So you can see if his hands are down like this, the elbow it would be foolish when the attack comes in to bring his hand up because the hand's got a long way to travel. So if you're caught with your hands down, when the attack comes in, the elbow is quickest to get to the centre. So Bong Sao, that's Pao Bong, as in your Chum Q form, casting Bong, second section, is the easiest one to use. However, if his hands are up in a ready position, then you can use whatever technique is appropriate there. You can see the nearest hand hitting, Tan and punch there. Pak Sao and punch. If we look at some of those, if you can attack from the other side there, Sean, so you can see it from the other angle. All depends on where the hands are as to what technique will come out, and depending obviously on the way the attack is driven. You can see every time going back into the Chun retreat step, putting himself in a position where if he wants to counter-attack and come forward now, he's able to drive forward. He's in a strong position to move. Do some the other way around. Excellent. We can now lead on to the corner drills, where we have a point of contact, just a man sao or something like that, just to feed learning contact reflexes and feeling in the direction of forces. Then we can look at various different attacks and how to defend them. These are just examples we can use. You could defend any way you like. Obviously, it depends on the feeling. But ultimately, we're arranging these so that you can see specific drills here. So if we get a hook punch come in, hooks out and a palm straight into the gap like we've done before out of contact by using the contact. If the punch comes a little bit closer in maybe, Tan Sao being used here and a punch. So he's using controlling the centre line. If the punch comes the other side there, Jut Sao and hit. Or you might get an uppercut. Again, Gan Sao there and coming in and hit. So just using the control of the centre line and feeling the direction of the forces and moving off according to the direction it comes in. If we can carry on doing some more of those, on the other hand maybe. You see the primary objective is to move forward and attack, just deflecting with the other hand, using the feeling and the line to come in and attack. doing these drills will train you to feel what's happening and to move the minimum amount necessary in order to open up the line and to access the attack. Okay, we're now going to look at the Poon Sao roll, which is a basic rolling action of Chi Sao, sticking hands, but we're going to break it down into just the rolling, and then initially we're going to do it one-sided, so we're just going to use the Bong Sao to Tan Sao action or just the Fook Sao action. It simplifies it, and once you've done that on all four sides effectively, so you can do left-handed versions of both sides, then you can really just put two people together and they should be able to roll sufficiently. Here we can start. You see Mark's doing the Bong Sao to Tan Sao, so he's learning to move his hand from the Bong Sao position to Tan Sao position, keeping the arm nice and relaxed with the emphasis on the elbows controlling. Chun here in the Fook Sao action, just keeping his Fook Sao arm pressing towards the centre, the whole forearm effectively is pressing towards the centre of the other person's body and controlling their arm. And again, the hand should be nice and relaxed because the elbow is where the control is coming from. Both people should be nice and square and nothing else should be really going apart from the arm. If you see that from the other side, if you just change, that's it. So obviously there's 4 ways you can do this, 4 different combinations you can use. And it's important to train your non-dominant side, your left side if you're right-handed, more than your natural side, because if you do that then you'll become slightly ambidextrous. You'll never quite become fully ambidextrous, but if you train your non-dominant side, you don't really need to train your dominant side very much because the skills will transfer. Now if there's any odd forces going on here, say for instance Mark's hand was pushing across too much, then Chun can use that force and just whip his arm round and just deflect it. As soon as the pressure's going, or if we roll back again here, if Chun's Tan Sao is pushing out a little bit or something, Mark can then use that force to let go of. So we can train the kind of springy forward feeling that we need for Wing Chun. And if we then go on to double-handed Poon Sao, so both hands are engaged now, one hand's doing Tan Sao and Bong Sao, the other hand's doing Fook Sao. So the same concept as we had before, applying with both arms at the same time now. And this is the preliminary action you need to learn before you learn Chi Sao. Now you can't actually see it here, but there's prying going on, so there's a forward springing action. We call that the springy force of Wing Chun, coming from the stance and pressing upwards, aiming to disrupt the person that's your partner, and also to develop a force that if one person takes their hands away, the hands will automatically spring forward, or the body will shoot forwards into the gap, as you can see there. And we can train that by either taking both hands away and letting the person move into the gap, or by taking one hand away and let the person's hand go forward. So the hands forward into the gap automatically, which is what we're aiming for in Wing Chun. We can then start to, if say for instance Chun pushes Mark's hands violently away, hands will spring straight back, or he might just push any individual hand out, or down or across or anything, and the hand should just spring back into the centre without any thought. Very important skills for learning Wing Chun. So we're not looking at any particular technique here or concept, we're just looking at the idea of the forward pressing and of the rolling of Poon Sao. You see when the hands get moved, the gap appears, the hands just automatically spring back into the line. And we're now going to take some of those scenarios you've seen before, but we're going to randomise what happens. So rather than having a set straight punch or a curved punch, we're going to get a bit of contact on the Man Sao Mu Sao fence and just make the punches random. So the attacker is going to give a little more aggression and a little bit more movement and a bit more random in what they do, just to start to learn to feel things rather than knowing what's going to happen. You can see here, Chun's getting a bit of contact here. The contact will help him tremendously as far as interpreting what's going to happen. And then Mark's going to throw random attacks in. And he's going to have to feel them, interpret where he's going, and defend himself. You see, once he's broken the posture of the attacker, once his head's gone back or his posture's broken, it's very difficult for him to throw any further attacks. And this is why it's very important to try and get the stance right and dig in and push upwards with every strike you do, which makes it much more difficult for the attacker to fight back. You see, just following and tracking wherever the person moves, just going straight in, staying square on and attacking with both hands. Excellent. And we can now take those, we can use different types of fence, and some with contact to give you a bit of contact reflex, some without contact, and different kinds of using your skill, trying to talk the person down maybe, and just training awareness of where your hands are and where the attack lines are for you and for the enemy. So you can start working different things. And now Chun can attack in very random, very varied ways. He can maybe try and grab, maybe try and punch, and Mark has to react to that according to the circumstance. Okay, we're going to look at some more drills moving forwards and backwards using the pads again now. Now we're going to look at the dango, the ascending heel kick, using the kick to close the gap down and then attacking off the lead hand and following up with the rear hand. So training yourself to kick first to close the distance and then go in and attack with the hands. Again, same thing. And now we can take the 2-mile retreat step, the push step, and look at the side kick from there, or the front kick, depending what happens. So if the attacker is particularly big or rushing in very powerfully, you might have to push yourself back just to give yourself a bit of breathing space. If the gap opens up, or if they end up being deflected to the side, then you can use the side kick, or if the gap opens up, you can use the front kick to close the gap down. Of course, if the gap hasn't opened up very much, if they're close enough to you to attack, then you should just attack. There's no point in moving out in order to kick. So, because what you're trying to do is close the gap. If the gap's already near to you, then just move in and attack with your hands. If the gap has opened up, if the range is there for kicking, then kick. So you just have to learn to kick instinctively from whatever position you're in. Obviously with a kick, you're trying to cause pain, instability and damage. And sometimes it will act just as a distraction. If we do that again slowly, see Chun's moving back. If he kicks the knee now, if he pushes it gently, you'll see what happens to the knee here. The whole structure of the leg gets bent over and the person's off balance. And obviously if you kick it hard enough, it'll damage it. We can now take the 2-mile push step, the retreat step, and we can add into it the shuffle step or the long step, rather like we did in single stick and hands with the step. So we're just taking the same concept. We're moving back initially, and then we're either moving across with a long step, or we're moving back initially, and then we're just turning around and doing a small shuffle step on the second attack. So you're learning to deal with one movement and then another movement in a random direction. You can see here Chun's using a push, but it could equally be a punch or any other attack you like. We're just learning to deal with lines of attack and pressures. You can see we're starting to build in, starting to take the individual drills that we did before and liven them up and put them into action, make them more realistic. Obviously later on we can then put them under pressure and test them with a bit more extreme pressure. But for the moment we're still working on the technical aspect. We're taking it out of the technical line and putting it into a more free-flowing random element. Another drill I often like to use is Wu Sao with a turning punch. So we're using Wu Sao and a punch to defend against an incoming punch. So one partner is just using full extension punches